Hey.
Right. I'm pulling up one of my kiddos' IEPs because I think, wait, let's see. In your group discussion, examine IEP goals currently being used. So we look at specific ones from
Mhm.
our kid. Okay. Pulling those up now.
Yeah, because the first question is what the goal is measuring.
Oh,
So,
I guess it would be, oh, sorry to cut you off.
no, go
It's
ahead.
probably our goal that we're focusing on, right?
I believe so, because that's how
Okay.
I took it. That's how I wrote, looking at it, because I talked about the student I'm working with and the fluency issues and the goals of becoming more independent in tasks and the social emotional behaviors that we were witnessing. So that's, if I'm wrong, I don't want to take you down a rabbit trail. I misread something. Um, but
Yeah.
after reading it, I was just this whole writing the PLAF and the IEPs and all this. I just have a whole different perspective now on the role of a special ed teacher and what exactly they're doing. Not that I didn't have respect for people before, but um, it's a very challenging, and because of the legal documents and having to make sure that it's within the parameters of a legally cautiously worded document, um, I have a lot of respect for them, even more so. So for me, I looked at it, and I'll go first. Sorry, since I was talking, since I don't shut up. So so I was looking at it, and the one thing that jumped out with the readings was about the inclusive IEP goals and working on academic and social skills in the natural, inclusive, general ed setting. So this weekend's focus was mostly on kids in a gen ed setting, not so much ABA or ERI. So that's the other reason I chose my students was I have a reading goal that's affecting the child working in Amplify CKLA because the reading is literally on level a little bit higher than probably end of third grade. And the student's struggling with it because we have a decoding issue. So the decoding goal is being measured to see if he can independently read texts that I've worked either in Magic School AI or through Notebook LM to bring it down to his reading level and the goals of social or behavioral measures and how he's able to work collaboratively and transition and carry out independent tasks because he would just literally sit there. I think I told you at the beginning, playing with scissors, tearing up paper, cutting his hair, making up these crazy stories about uranium and all those other things. So I've been considering the goals and the skills and how it affects his ability to participate in everyday instruction. And I'm not just looking at performance as a separate side issue, but can he actually do the work now that it's been modified to his level, but he's still getting the standard, but can he do it successfully? Can he repeat it in the gen ed classroom?
I'm glad you brought up the inclusive IEP goals because that surprised me a lot when I was doing the readings and watching that video. The importance of it being measured in a gen ed setting.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I didn't even realize that that was something that was happening where students were being excluded from gen ed, and the excuse was that, oh, they have goals they need to work on, and so and so. But also, as a like collaborative co-teaching model last year, it was so much easier when I had a student's goal that could be measured from their like math test or from like a reading assignment that was already done, because I didn't need to really pull that student to do another assessment, which they're already, very overwhelmed with the amount of work they do. It was a great way to kind of blend it into the curriculum that we were using and measuring their IEP with it. However, I had some students and the goals were written specific, which was good, but it was almost too specific where I wasn't able to apply any of it to like some of the gen ed assignments that we were doing. And that was tricky because I had to pull them all one on one and like assess them like 4 times for like each objective of the goal. it had been a lot. So definitely when I was watching that, I was like, yes, I totally agree. Like they should be specific and everything, but they should also connect to gen ed, which I'm glad that the student I chose for the project, his blends really well with like reading and writing. My goal is given assessment of decoding, student will read words with R controls, common long vowels, and complex consonants with 80% accuracy on 4 consecutive data collection opportunities each 9 weeks, which is our quarters. So basically, I just need to hear him read words with those patterns, which we see all the time in 4th grade. And we even have lessons that are focused completely on R controlled or some different types of like complex consonants. So it is really nice that the special ed teacher who works with him is able to take assessments that we're already doing in class and almost like get both data, get multiple means of data out of it.
Mine looks a little different because most of my students are nonverbal. So many of our goals measure functional communication using AAC devices because all of my students, don't have words, like their voice is their words. So for her, my student that I chose for her goal, it's like matching or identifying the letters in her name. So, based on the iris sensor goals must measure a specific observable skill that connects directly to the student's present level of performance. So instead of improved communication, we write something measurable like using AAC to request or respond during group instruction. So during her trials, I show her the card and she'll either match it or she'll show me on her AAC because she doesn't have the words. So
The AAC was amazing. I don't remember when we went through that class and we had to download that app, and because of being a speaking person, it was frustrating having to find that. But yet I had known when I lived in England, I met a younger gentleman who had uh what did he was it wasn't cerebral palsy. It was whatever Stephen Hawkins ended up with. And he would communicate by tapping his foot through a computer, and it actually talked to you in sentences. So he comprehended everything you were saying to him, and his responses came through. And it actually was very helpful because after that, I just got back from the Gulf War, and patience was not my virtue. It was kind of like, let's go, move it, come on, come on, come on. But learning to talk to him, oftentimes, it also changed how I looked at handicapped people, I guess, because he wasn't handicapped. Yeah, he was sitting in a wheelchair and he couldn't talk to me, but he was talking to me. So it was an amazing get out of your little nasty self-centered box and recognize he's still he's fully functioning, just not in the capacity that I am, but he can contribute and he's part of society. So it gave me a whole different perspective on people with using AACs and devices to speak to people.
I
I
totally
agree.
agree.
Those devices are amazing because they are their voice because
Mm-hmm.
they have the words, but they just can't say them. So
And even when we had to use that app at first, when I was just looking at it, I was like, wow, there's so many like words that are so like easily accessible. And then as soon as I had to speak like with what I was trying to communicate, I was like, wait, they don't have that word, or how do I say this? Or even just the grammar with it was like difficult
Mhm.
for me to get across. And I was like, wow, like before I had like looked at those devices, and which it is very advanced, that technology, and it is super helpful. But then you think about when that's someone's only way to communicate, of course, it's not going to reach everything that they need to as quickly as it ideally would like to.
Right.
So yeah, definitely open my eyes to like patience and understanding, and that communication looks different to everybody.
Mhm.
And I'm sure we see that a lot with our different students and their needs.
Definitely. So then how is progress measured uh, when we're doing this? Well, this is all, like I said, it's been an eye opener. Uh, and the one quote that jumped out reading was measurable goals require clear methods for collecting data to determine whether progress is occurring. And I think I told you before where when I had co-teachers, it just seemed like, okay, cross out this question. It's just a little too hard for them, or do this. So it really wasn't looking at their IEP goals and helping them to be successful in the standard. It was more like just eliminating things so that instead of 20 questions, they maybe had 10 or 7 or something. So it really wasn't based on this course what we were doing. So now, having done this, I'm actually using the curriculum to measure oral reading of passages and tracking growth and monitoring all of the data to make sure that the interventions are working. And I have a running record that's guiding with concrete evidence. And I'm regularly doing this. Every day when we do Wilson, we're doing that. And for the behavior goals, I've been keeping track of how often do I need to refocus the student to keep them on task or get him back on task. So the progress is being measured using consistent data collection methods and growth that can be documented objectively based on all of the things that I've been doing with him in the classroom.
Also, going off what you said, that one of the things the Iris Center explains, the progress must be measurable and observable. So in my ABA classroom, we collect daily data using frequency counts, percent accuracy across trials, and levels of prompting. So for example, we may track how many independent AAC responses occur during a 10-minute activity, or the percentage of correct letter matches during instruction.
My IEP goal, it's being measured through data collection, is the little checklist. And I'm sure yours looks similar, where they have like, oh, like homework, classwork, observation. That's the only one that's clicked for mine. And looking at it now, I do find that a little bit surprising, because you would think that also like classroom participation and tests and quizzes and other sort of assessments we do could also measure this. But it is a little bit tricky, since it needs to be like an assessment and they need to have 4 different opportunities to do it. But it's hard. I feel like you can sit down and you can absolutely, measure the goal the way it's intended. But then you also have like observational notes of things you've heard as a teacher, or like formative assessments. And I guess that would go in the PLAF then, about the like less formal progress towards the goal that you're also seeing.
Yeah. What shocked me with the next question, looking at 3, and it says whether the criteria aligns with the present level. And the one thing that was interesting was reading goals should be ambitious but attainable based on the student's current performance. And that made me think back to some of the other students that I've had. Were their goals ambitious? Because I'm thinking of kids last year, because I had a POR gen ed class last year, and the PORs never really left the room. So they weren't getting pulled out anywhere. And reading their IEPs, I don't remember things that, thinking back to how they were performing in the gen ed class since they didn't leave, that in their IEP was pushing them a little bit more than just, can you do this 80% of the time? Being in the gen ed class, I think, did push them, but that wasn't in there. So now thinking about that, I guess it's the goals are to compare the students' current performance data before the instruction even begins. And so with those kids, they were way below grade level. I mean, we're talking kindergarten, and some of them couldn't read at all. So the goal should have been meaningful and attainable. And it was stuff like, oh, they'll know CVC words by the end of the year. Well, that's cat, some of these kids were far more able than just knowing the word cat. And the goals must reflect what the students need and access to instruction. So now alignment to me brings out a whole different thing. The goals need to reflect not where the student is currently, but based on how they're performing, where they can get to. And truly, the biggest thing I think oftentimes is reminding kids you have this IEP, and instead of stereotyping them, where I understand with a non-speaking student, it's different. but most of the kids that you see in ICR and POR, they're not, you don't have to be defined by the IEP.
Mm-hmm.
And you're far more capable than even you think. So I liked that quote, and it gave me a whole different way of looking at things. Push them a little bit harder. You do it with gen ed. Why can't we do that with an ICR POR student?
Mhm. It's so tricky too, finding the right amount because you want to push them, but you don't want to push them
Right.
like too much where it's like unattainable. And I ran into that problem last year with one of my students who had this goal where she had to read a passage, she had to identify the theme, and she had to identify the two supporting details in writing. And that was a very demanding task for her because, of course, comprehension was an area where she was struggling with. And I remember mom was upset because that goal hadn't been met in the timeline, so we had to push the dates back. And which reasonably so, mom was stressed out. She was like, she's not meeting her goals. Like, why is she in this placement? Like, we need more interventions. And it was tricky as a teacher because I had to be very honest and be like, this wasn't really an attainable goal for her. Like, some of my other students without IEPs couldn't even do this goal either at this time. It's a very normal skill for fourth grade. So that's why I feel like it's very important. You're absolutely right to like find out where they are and push them just a little bit more and not just kind of label something that could be too easy or too challenging.
I agree with that. That's what I wrote down. Goals must come, I feel like, directly from the plaque and reflect a realistic next step for them. Because if it's not realistic and you don't think that they could do it, it shouldn't be, something that you're hoping that they're going to do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It just shocked me though, because they had the lawsuits where it said that what was it? The Andrew implication, and there's actually been lawsuits where the district courts have found that IEP goals in reading and math for they use Shannon Carter were so unambitious that the school district lost in the Carter versus Florence County School District and the Andrew F versus Douglas Carter School System. So it just that I never thought of that,
Mm-hmm.
that the goals just weren't ambitious enough, that it was just kind of the bare minimum, and that there was court cases and litigation over it. That shocked
Mm-hmm.
me.
Which, looking back in hindsight, that makes sense, right? You want to write goals that you think students can achieve, but if they're not being challenged to get it, they're not really growing. They're just constantly showing you over and over again that same level of performance. Um, and I do feel like that with behaviors as well. I know it's a little bit different, but I sometimes struggle with like with my students without IEPs, I like push them and if they weren't listening to a direction, then they need to problem solve and they need to ask a friend or they need to look around them. And I do struggle a bit because I have so many learners with IEPs this year. It's in their accommodations. They need repeat directions and they need reteaching as necessary. And it's hard for me as a teacher in the beginning of the year, especially, to find that common ground where I'm still accommodating to their disability and I'm not, putting them at a disadvantage. But I also want to teach them how to be independent, and I would hate for them to grow a learned helplessness because they know they will be assisted with something that they are capable of. Of course, it's different if that's out of their range.
Right. Then our last question is, what revisions would improve clarity or defensibility? So that one, I read the goals should not become a barrier to inclusive opportunities. So I guess that gets us back to the least restrictive environment. And the end goal for all of the students, at least verbally and able to physically move, would be to get them back into a gen ed classroom where they can perform. So for me, what I've been doing with the notes that I've gotten from Dr. Hamilton and just going through stuff, I've been revising kind of vague goals and things that I had written for behaviors. I've been trying to make it clear so that any teacher can pick it up and understand the point and run with it, instead of I got it, but I only have him in the classroom, for another 2.5 months. Is it March, April? So 3 months, and he's off to fourth grade. So instead of passing it on, at least they'll be able to understand. I've included conditions such as when and where and how the skills should be demonstrated. The measurable goals are more progress, more accurate instead of kind of vague. Just you'll be able to read. Great. Read what? When? So now we have specific. So I've written clearer goals to improve consistency. So like I said, so any teacher can pick up and work with this student if anything should happen. I'm not there. Or in fourth grade, they'll know exactly what I've measured, what needs to be measured so that there's success.
Looking at my goal, it's focused on those R controlled words, common long vowels, and complex consonants. And I've even broken it down and sectioned it in my assignments, and I would do one thing focused on R controls, one thing on common long vowel. And I almost had wished that there were short-term objectives underneath for each specific one, so you were able to see like which ones he had mastered and which word patterns he still needed to go back to. Because I'm doing that myself, and making notes about it, but it's not included in the IEP goal. And I do think that would be helpful to see, this student mastered this in October, so like no need to reassess over and over. Let's put more instruction into this other section that he's still developing. So I guess that would be my only revision for my goal.
I put strong goals as described by the Iris Center, include the condition, the specific behavior, and the measurable criteria.
Yep, it does. Mine were written very vague for the two students that I do have. And but I told you, we also had a lot of issues where some of the IEPs were not accurate anyway, because of the changes between the teachers, the case managers. But there was just this one, poorly written goals can become a barrier to inclusion.
Mhm.
And so that got me, because if I can get the students, and that was my goal with last year, I had one student who was held back, worked with him not only in Wilson, but also had him 2 years in a row. His parents requested, and now we got him to the point that he went from POR to ICR, and his mom sends me his report card every quarter, and he's getting 80s and 90s. So that was the goal, for him to see, you can do this. You have that ability to do it. Whatever you set your mind to, you can achieve it. And he's doing it. So he's my first thumbs up going forward. But I do have another one. I just saw the newspaper, a little guy 3 years ago in third grade, his father passed away, his grandmother passed away. He was struggling. He was in Wilson, had an IEP. Well, he made it from POR ICR to just gen ed now, and he just made the honor roll for his sixth grade class. So that's the success stories we're going for with these little guys.
It's so empowering. I had a student last year who, I guess, like scored out of an IEP. Like we did reevaluation and she didn't need it anymore. And just seeing mom's like gratitude for the school was so heartwarming. You saw, all these supports pay off, and she was able to, get back on track with everybody. It was just, I'm gonna get goosebumps talking about it. It was just very, very exciting.
What eventually happens with students that you have, Angelica? What, because I don't know my whole extent has been ICR POR. So what's the next steps for a student in your contained classroom?
Well, they would just, go to like the next grade, but the goals, or things that they're working on are probably just going to stay the same until they like master things out. Like the teacher last year that had all of my students, she like showed me her goals. So the goals are the same, and they just, move on and work on the same goals and, same skills until they kind of like master them out. So, I mean, some are higher than others, some are lower than others, but it's pretty sad.
Yeah. we have the programs at school, but there's one little guy in there. He's happy-go-lucky, but he's a runner. So he they try to keep him, that little guy, put shoes on him, phew, he's gone. But and he's trying to sound words, which is interesting because he can use motor skills. So you see him tapping, so he does recognize the pictures. He's come to learn the pictures. But I guess in hearing it over and over, he tries to say his name, and you hear him say Justin is his name. And so
Oh,
he's trying. So hopefully Justin one day gets to say
his
his name.
name.
Yeah.
It's also bittersweet. It's like so tough to see these kids working so hard. But then you see these success stories and it's,
It's all
it's,
worth it.
yeah, exactly. Hmm.
Yeah. We have a whole ERI program this year in our building. We didn't have it before. And the kids in there are rough. I mean,
Hmm.
really rough, violent, kind of foul mouth and stuff. And the one kid, I've told you, he's decided he's my buddy. So I'm the only adult he doesn't talk back to and tell me to go F off or whatever. But the other day, you know what it is? I've sat with him when I've substituted or covered during prep for another teacher. So I sit with him. And the other day I let him teach me how to play 99 math. So I figured, sure, show me how to do this. And so he's like, you got to do this, you got to do that and he just thinks we're buds now. And so he doesn't talk back. And the one aide was asking me, why is he not like that with you? I think it's because I treat him like a little adult instead of kind of talking down at him, and I don't give in to him when he starts to display the behavioral issues. I just
Hmm.
walk away and ignore him.
Hmm.
But we're seeing progress.
That's something I need to get better at. I have my own Velcro student, and I think he feeds off the attention that I give him when I'm correcting him. So, because sometimes he does get me worked up, and I'll catch myself getting emotional. I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back. I'm talking to a 10-year-old right now. And I think by staying like calm and poised and like walking away and modeling, not talking back or arguing, I think that'll go a long way with him. So need to get better at that.
I agree. I feel like ignoring like behaviors like that, like if one of my kids will like throw himself on the floor or not want to get up, I'm like, okay, like we're leaving. And then like nobody's giving him the attention or her the attention. Like if there's like five or six adults like surrounding them, like that's what they want. They want all that attention. So when you walk away is when they're like, okay, like nobody's giving me the attention. So I'm just gonna
Mhm.
stop doing it.
Which makes total sense. I just get so nervous when, especially it's in a whole group setting, not correcting the behavior because I
Mhm.
don't want to enable it and let him think that
Exactly.
that's okay. It's such like a fine line because you're absolutely right. Like when they stop getting that attention, usually those behaviors stop as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop our recording before it kicks us out.